Hello everyone, Mrs. Below here. In this video I'm going to be going over the DNA to protein notes on the Hershey-Chase experiment and Franklin, Wilkins, Watson, and Crick, some scientists that helped to contribute to the discovery of DNA structure. But let's start with the Hershey-Chase experiment. So this is very similar to what Avery was doing, trying to prove that DNA, not proteins, is what is being inherited and passed on, not proteins. Many scientists at the time thought proteins were the molecule that had to do with inheritance, when really it was DNA. So Avery's experiment and also Hershey and Chase, their experiment, supported that DNA is the molecule that is being passed on and inherited. In Avery's experiment, we saw that when the DNA was destroyed using DNase, okay, that is the only time that the mouse survived in that last trial that Griffith was doing. Remember, in Griffith's last trial with the mouse unexpectedly died, and he called this transformation because the heat-killed S bacteria was mixed with the R bacteria, and he expected this to not be deadly to the mouse, but it was, and he found living S bacteria, even though it had been heat killed. He found that in the mice because this had occurred, transformation. The DNA from the heat killed S bacteria was picked up by the living R bacteria, and it transformed that living R bacteria into S bacteria, which was deadly to the mouse. So in this experiment, we're again supporting that DNA is what's being inherited. So in the Hershey-Chase experiment, they used something called a bacteriophage. Now this is a virus that specifically infects bacteria. So you could see the virus here. It is injecting its DNA, but again, here's where the supporting evidence for that comes in. So in the Hershey-Chase experiment, they used two different radioactive elements that act like these markers or indicators. So sulfur, which is represented by S here, sulfur, that is present in proteins, okay? And then in this experiment here, they used phosphorus, which is present in DNA, right? That sugar phosphate backbone, phosphate being one of those parts that make up a nucleotide. So they use those two elements to indicate the presence of either proteins or DNA. So they use both those markers. They let the virus infect the bacteria cell, and then they separated the two components. And what they found was here, this is the sulfur that was not present in the bacteria when it was separated, versus the phosphorus was present inside of the bacteria after it was separated from the virus. So therefore, the virus must be injecting and infecting the bacteria with DNA, because phosphorus was found inside of the bacteria, and phosphorus is an indicator of DNA. Because phosphorus is found in DNA, it's not found in proteins, and sulfur is found in proteins, but it's not found in DNA. If you remember, DNA, Sanch, and then, proteins was Sanch, and then DNA was paunch. So those are the two elements that they differ in. So to summarize that was just the diagram. Again, Avery confirmed the DNA is in fact hereditary. It can be passed on, and Hershey-Chase further supported that idea. So again, they used a bacteriophage. That's a virus that infects bacteria cells. One contained sulfur, which again indicates the presence of proteins. Again, remember, Sanch. And then in the other experiment, they used phosphorus, and that indicated the presence of DNA. Remember, Ponch. Okay. They let the bacteriophage infect the bacteria, then they separated the bacteriophage from the bacteria. And they found the phosphorus had entered the bacteria, meaning DNA must be the material that was injected into the bacteria, and thus it is what is inherited. These bacteriophages, actually that little squiggly thing that you see inside here, that is the DNA. And then the rest of the virus is actually made up of proteins. It's called a protein coat normally. So their experiment just further supported, yes, it's DNA that's inherited that can be passed on, not proteins. And then the last few scientists I want to talk about are Watson and Crick, and then Franklin and Wilkins. These scientists basically created the model of DNA. So Watson and Crick created, like I said, a model, okay, of DNA with a lot of trial and error. You can actually find this, I don't know if it's the original one, but you can find this on display at the Museum of Science and Industry, MSI, the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. And they figured this out with the help of Franklin and Wilkins. Not like they just kind of came up with this on their own, okay? They created the model, but they had some help doing it. So Franklin and Wilkins use diffraction X-rays. It's called crystallography. It's a technique in which DNA is bombarded with X-rays. So again, they use this process or this technique called crystallography. Okay, and pretty much bombards the DNA with X-rays, and then they diffract, and then you can pick up this pattern on film. And this was the one of the most famous pictures that was picked up from that. When Franklin and Wilkins, when they saw this image, they were able to kind of put the final pieces together to figure out that DNA is a double helix structure. It's that twisted ladder. So Watson and Crick used this to correctly construct their model of DNA into a uniform ladder that was twisted. And again, this is what we called a helix. These three scientists, they actually won the Nobel Prize for this. However, unfortunately, Rosalind Franklin, she passed away before that was given. Most likely, she did a lot of other things besides this, but she was working with X-rays, and she was being exposed to radiation. And I believe this led to, I think she actually died of ovarian cancer, which is not very surprising, considering she was constantly being exposed to X-rays. So in summary, Watson, Crick, Franklin, Wilkins discovered the structure of DNA. And then Griffith, Avery, and Hershey-Chase. Hershey and Chase, that's two people, by the way. They both worked together on that experiment. They confirmed DNA is genetic material and is hereditary, meaning it can be passed on. And we're going to talk a lot more about genetics in the next few units.